you for having me and at Boğaziçi University's Boğaziçi Finance Summit event. And I want to thank the Center for Applied Research in Finance, Dr. Vedat Akigire, for the invitation. And also I want to thank my friend, Dr. Yüksel Gomez from the Central Bank of Turkey, who is a longtime friend of mine and who made the introduction. So that it is possible that I could have the honor to speak here. My name is Ben Shenglin and I'm from Zhejiang University. It's one of the oldest, but also one of the largest and possibly the most prestigious university in China and in the world. And I'm speaking from Hangzhou. So right now it's in the afternoon of Hangzhou time. So it's good afternoon from Hangzhou. For those of you who don't know Hangzhou is the center for fintech because we are the headquarters of Alibaba as well as the Ant Group and the largest and probably most innovative fintech company in the world. I have noticed the theme of today's event is good finance. Why and how? And I think what I will do is today, I hope what I will talk today will be able to contribute in a small way to why good finance is important, how we can make finance good for society, for everybody, and how we are going to get there. And the subject or the title of my presentation today is what I call global fintech landscape and the regional opportunities for Turkey, for everybody in your region as well. What I will do is that the four parts I will do. First and foremost, as a professor, we always want to define terminologies more clearly. So I will share with you my definition of fintech versus techfin. Secondly, I will be talking about the different development stages of fintech from stage 1.0 to 3.0. And thirdly, I will share and result of the study of my team have done. The global fintech landscape. Who are the leaders, who are leading and why and how. And finally, I will share some of my observations about fintech in your region, some of the possible opportunities that we can work together. First, fintech or techfin. For me, in a narrowly defined sense, fintech means financial service companies like banks, insurance companies. They apply technologies better, they are smarter in applying technologies to improve their customer services, their experiences, they reduce their cost, and expand their scope, making more money. So that's what we generally call fintech. While techfin tends to mean the technology companies like Amazon, like Google, like Tencent or Alibaba in China, they expand their business boundaries into financial services as part of their overall, customer services, customer products, so that, for example, payment, because they need to sell something and they need to get paid. So Google Pay or Alipay is to facilitate those transactions. So it's fintech, it's mainly driven by the financial service companies, while techfin, mainly driven by the technology companies or what we call big techs. But of course today, fintech and techfin tend to be mingling with each other, converging as one. So in financial services companies, technology has always been a key driver in financial services. Over the last, 70 years, since, World War II, technology has always been a key component of the financial services in driving some of the services. For example, in the 1950s, credit card was introduced thanks to the technology, the information technology. Same can be said about the ATM machines. In the 1960s, in the 1970s, you have the point of sales machines. and other services, SWIFT systems, for example. They were there because of the technology. In the 1980s, for example, the financial engineering and many other things were made possible thanks to technology, mainly by the information technology. And in the 1990s, when I started my career in banking, the CRM, customer relationship management tool, was very popular. Again, thanks to the technology. And in this century, the online banking, the crowdfunding, the marketplace lending, even Bitcoin, they were introduced thanks to the technology. And of course, same in the past, say, 10 years, for example, like Yuebao, which was sold through Alipay in China. Today, it's the largest money market fund in the world. Thanks to technology, today, everybody is talking about, basic, the blockchains, the AIs, the IoTs, and so on and so forth. They are making us smarter. And that's why we call, or many people say, we have entered the area of intelligent finance, a third stage of the fintech. I must say, while fintech is very popular in China, and many people in China, like myself, would love to say fintech originated from China. But the fact is that it is not. Fintech started from the United States and the United Kingdom in many ways. For example, the first online bank, what they call US Security First Network Bank, the first online bank in the world, was introduced in the United States in the 1990s. PayPal was as the first third-party payment service provider, was started in the United States, 5 years ahead of Alipay. And the first, say, peer-to-peer lending platforms, ZOPA, Zone of Possible Agreements, was started in London first. Same year, the Prosper was established in the United States. And then, of course, Bitcoin was created in many ways from the United States and UK in 2015. Introduced a very innovative, called like a regulatory sandbox. Today, that concept and framework has become very popular among the policymakers and regulators in the world. According to our count, 42 countries have adopted regulatory sandbox in one shape or another. And of course, last year, Facebook issued the white paper on Libra, how they want to jump into the bandwagon for the payment, especially on the cross-border side. Think about that. Facebook has 2.7 billion users. It would be an excellent ecosystem to introduce something called cross-border payment. But China has been learning, so we have learned quite a bit from the US, UK, and many other countries. For example, 5 years after PayPal was established, Alipay was founded, was offered in Hangzhou, in my city. That started China's fintech journey. So that's why we always call in China Hangzhou as the birthplace of China's fintech. And China was very good at copying, learning. So PP Dai, for example, was a copycat of ZOPA in terms of peer-to-peer lending platforms. And 80 years later, in 2011, the Central Bank of China issued the official license for Alipay. 8 years without real license, okay? So you could see that Chinese Central Bank was very inclusive, was pretty much open-minded. And then, of course, the internet finance as a concept was introduced and proposed in 2012. So many people in the West didn't know what internet finance was until fintech became a Western or was established as a popular terminology. So that's why sometimes as a Chinese, I feel a bit frustrated that we need to find a better way to communicate what we do in China. And I mentioned already, Yuebao as the largest money market fund, was issued and in 2013, thanks to the platform Alipay. And of course, in the same year, the first pure online insurance company, Zhong'an, was established. And then the first online bank called WeBank was established in China. Ant Group was established in October 2014, just 1 month ahead of AIF, Academy of International Finance, and was established as one of the first in China and possibly in the world. Then, of course, last year, after a few years of so-called like consolidation of the fintech sector, especially the crackdown on some of the illegal activities through the peer-to-peer lending platforms, China Central Bank formally relaunched the Fintech Development Plan to confirm that the development of fintech is the major trend and is a major policy priority. So globally and also domestically in China, there are two streams. The global, the US, UK were leading in many ways, and China was learning, was applying. And what I have seen here is that on the left, you would see like a global fintech, the 3 stages they were experiencing in a broader sense. So-called IT stage, the online stage, internet finance stage, and then of course what we call the intelligent finance stage. And on the right, you could see that China was learning, was copying, was emulating what the rest of the world was doing. And at the second stage, thanks to strong digital infrastructure in China, the telecom companies were doing a good job, but also thanks to Tencent, Alibaba, and many technology companies are global leaders. So they were able to offer something that Chinese banks were not able to offer, because Chinese banks were making too much money too easily by just lending. So they ignored the need to provide payment services for the general public. So that's why Alipay and WeChat Pay were leading. And at this stage, China probably began to leapfrog the world. So what I call today the House of Fintech. Who are they? How they look like? First and foremost, you would see that you have internet, what we call banks, internet insurance companies. These are like, as I mentioned, like online things like WeBank, like MyBank, and so on and so forth. Then you have the alternative finance, what do we call the peer-to-peer lendings, the third-party payment services, robot advisory, and so on, crowdfunding. But also, more importantly, on the right is what we call digitization of financial sector. That means how banks, insurance companies, brokerages, they became more digitally savvy and smarter in applying technologies. They are on top of what we call the most important fintech infrastructure. That means really the technologies, what I call the basics, blockchains, the AIs, the securities, and the cloud computing, and so on and so forth. Then you have, of course, the 3 stages, the Fintech 1.0, Fintech 2.0, Fintech 3.0. And what you can see is also what are the things called fintech in a narrowly defined sense. Some are called tech fin. So what are the key opportunities that we face? Good finance, how we can make finance good. What I see are the 2 key opportunities. First is what I call fintech. That means the digitalization of the traditional financial service sector. That means banks, insurance companies, and so on and so forth. These are huge opportunities. For example, in my country, we have some of the largest banks in the world. The ICBC, the Bank of China, the China Construction Bank, Agricultural Bank of China, they are all the top 10 banks in the world in terms of market cap, alongside with, say, JP Morgan, HSBC, and so on and so forth. But they can be smarter and better in what they do through technology. For a country like China, for example, we have 300 trillion renminbi under so-called like a banking sector. It's 3 times of the China's GDP. So if we could digitize them, make them smarter and more conducive to economic growth for real economy, it will be a huge boost to the society. It will be good finance for the world, for China as well. And the second opportunity, I think, is really what I call tech fins. That means like Ant Group. They have done a good job in China. It's, it can be controversial, but they have done a good job in provide some of the basic inclusive financial services to the general public, to those who were ignored by the traditional banking sector. We have learned from the rest of the world, from the US, from UK, as I mentioned, but we also have innovated based on the Chinese market as a developing country. And we have the opportunity to share what we have done good, what we have not done well, so that other countries like Turkey do not have to repeat the same mistake that we have made, but also can learn one or two from the Chinese practice. So to that extent, we have opportunity to move from what we call copy to China to the next stage. Copy from China. That means what we have accumulated in terms of experience, the lessons we have learned, can be shared, can be replicated, so that more people in the world can benefit from China's experience. And that's what Ant Group is trying to do. So they have already set up joint ventures in about 10 countries, in India, in Bangladesh, in Indonesia, in Malaysia, and so on and so forth. So there are three kind of like business models or development models for fintech. What I call the demand-driven model, which is China. What I'm sharing with you at table, China is demand-driven because of the market demand. But also you look at the USA and look at the UK. And I have different rankings here. You have the industry ranking, how good is the technology sector, how good is the R&D, how good is the regulation, how supportive is the government policy, and so on and so forth. China is number 3 in terms of ecosystem. US is number 1, and UK is number 2. So they represent different models. China is more demand-driven. US is a lot more technology-driven, while UK is very good at regulations like regulatory sandbox. It also helps the whole fintech development and London as a financial center, how they can transform themselves into a fintech center. So I don't think any other country can really compete with the US in terms of original technology innovations. So that model probably is difficult for other countries to emulate, to copy. UK model, the British model, I think it's already being applicable and being copied, applied in other countries. I think in some, generally speaking, OECD countries can learn from basically the British model, improve their regulation, make the financial service companies smarter through digital technologies, through smarter policy and regulations. And that's why regulatory sandbox has already been broadly applied in many of the developed countries, like Canada, like Australia, like Singapore, or Japan. So that model is more applicable to the developed country. Chinese model, I think, is a lot more suitable for some of the large developing countries. Because China is a developing country, so we have a similar financial service sector. That means the financial repression. Traditional banks were not able to meet the needs of the smaller businesses or the mama and pops in general. So that's why the tech thing, Alipay and WeChat Pay, they were able to fill the gap. And I believe that in Turkey, like in Indonesia, in Nigeria, in India, all the big markets, but still at a more developing stage, the traditional banks were not able to meet effectively the needs of the general public and society, I think the Chinese model can be something which is more relevant, of course, through certain modification to your local needs. Then, let me share with you the research output of my team, what we call a Global Fintech Hub report. So what we have been trying to figure out is that we look at good finance, as the same you call, how competitive is the industry? Are they good? How strong are they? We also look at the second dimension is what we call consumer experience, because we believe a good finance must benefit consumers and general public. So we look at the consumer experience, how the fintech is making the financial services more accessible, more affordable, and more available to the general public. And third aspect, we look at the ecosystem, basically from a public perspective. That means the government perspective. We look at the economic strength, the foundation, the GDPs. We look at their population, how young the population is, how big is the population. We look at the industry foundation. For example, how strong is the financial sector, how strong is the technology sector. We also look at the digital infrastructure, the telecom side, the cyber security. We look at their research capacity, for example, how good are the universities are, and how much R&D money, funding, from a policy perspective, and how good are they in terms of regulating the sector. We look at more than 70 cities across the world. We consulted over 100 experts from the world. We look at the various indicators. We have so far published 15 reports at various conferences. Unfortunately, because we have been very busy, we have only been able to publish one English report. So if you would like to have one, please contact us. This is what we found. The global fintech landscape. I put it on the world map. And what you can see, the numbers, meaning represent their global ranking. And what you will see is that Asia and America are leading, while Europe follows. You will see like Beijing in Asia, in China, for example. You will see Singapore as part of Asia. But you will also see, Seattle and San Francisco. In Americas, you will see also London. So more specifically, the table I can show it more clearly is first and foremost, there are 8 global centers for fintech, what we call global fintech hubs. You have Beijing as number 1. You have San Francisco, Silicon Valley as 1. You have New York, you have Shanghai, you have London, the Shenzhen is in southern China near Hong Kong, and Hangzhou, that's my city, is number 6. It's a tie with Shenzhen, and you have Chicago. Chicago is a newly added global fintech hub from last year. The 8 cities, they have about 75 points out of 100. So on average, and you have 4 cities from China, 3 from US, and 1 from UK. That pretty much represents where we are in terms of global centers. In addition to the global centers, we have what we call regional centers, regional fintech hubs. What you will see is that Singapore tops that list as a regional hub, especially for Southeastern Asia. And you have Sydney, you have Tokyo, Atlanta, Paris, to basically even Geneva as the number 40. What you see is that in various cities across the world, they were featured thanks to their effort and progress in terms of fintech development, in terms of the fintech sector, how strong is the industry, how good is the consumer experience, how good is the ecosystem. Now let me move to the last part for the region. And my team has been working on how finance can be good for our friends across the world, for those people who are underrepresented, especially underserved by the mainstream financial service companies. This is what we did, what we call Islamic fintech. We noticed 1.8 billion Muslims across the world, represent about 25% of global population, but the traditional financial services have not been able to provide the kind of inclusive finance that the population need. And of course, based on our research, there are about 142 called the fintech companies serving the Muslims population. They are focused on crowdfunding, peer-to-peer lending, as well as blockchain applications in finance. So technology applied in financial services. And what you see is that, crowdfunding, peer-to-peer lending, but various, say, for example, so-called representative companies. And I guess I'm not going to show off what I have learned from your region because you probably know better than I do. For the fintech in Turkey, what we have learned is that Istanbul, your city, your nice city, is considered as an emerging center for fintech development based on our research. Global Fintech Hub Report 2020, and some of the basic facts that we have learned about your nice city is that we look at your GDP, not just the city, but also the country, because Istanbul is the center for the country, so it can serve the whole country. We look at the population of the city. We also look at the population of the country, Turkey as a whole, 82 million people. And we also look at how strong is the economic growth in terms of GDP growth rate. And we also look at the cybersecurity, the digital infrastructure side, the internet adoption rate. And what you can see is that we also have a few names from your industry, the fintech sector, like Papara, Parasuit. And we look at the fintech ecosystem. We assign them some stars. And of course, I must say, we don't know enough about your city or your country. So we'd love to have the feedback and even to collaborate with your good university and other industry players or even the regulators to improve the data collection, but also improve our joint understanding of the fintech in Istanbul. We also look at we are doing a research called the BRI, Belt and Road Initiative countries in terms of fintech. And based on our research, and the theme is what we call good finance and why and how. That's the same question we have asked ourselves over the last 6 years. As I mentioned, I represent the AIF, Academy Internet Finance. We were founded 6 years ago. We were one of the pioneers in terms of fintech research. We consider ourselves as a fintech ecosystem. So Zhejiang University is one of the best universities in China and in the world. So based on what the university's ecosystem, we have created a fintech ecosystem around Zhejiang University, but also inclusive of the rest of the world. So what we have emphasized are three things: interdisciplinary, that means the cross-disciplinary research. Our AIF and ZIPS is sponsored by 7 different schools, from school computer science to school economics and school mathematics. So we work together. Secondly, we look at the international. We're trying to build bridges, build connectivity, build partnerships with many academic institutions, multinational institutions, as well as government regulators outside China. But we also are kind of innovative, so we ourselves are incubator. We run our own incubator, and that's being replicated to other cities in China. And hopefully, one day, if there's opportunity, we'd love to work with our friends in Turkey to do something in Istanbul as a part of our extension to make finance good for the society, not just for China, but also for the rest of the world. So, as we say, connect the world and shape the future. Together, we can make finance good, make finance better, make the world better. Thank you very much.